Good morning everyone. Once again, thank you for coming. I know a lot is happening in Goa, but even there on a Sunday morning, you promised to come here for this is a lovely gesture. Today we are here for a conversation between Priya Hajela and Nirupama Krishnaswami. It is about writing a good story. Priya Hajela is a fiction writer who lived in Pune and Goa with a husband and 2 dogs. She graduated with an MFA in creative writing from Harper Collins India in 2017 after a 22-year career in the corporate world. Priya is the author of Ladies Tailor, a novel published by Harper Collins India. She has written and published several short stories, An Affair, in Indian Rumination, The Tattoo Artist in Life Encounter, and Daughter's Revenge in Kitab. She also writes regular lifestyle features for the Daily Guardian, Delhi. On the other hand, Nirupama is a corporate lawyer who has been in the profession for 25 years and counting after graduating from the National Law School, Bangalore in 1997. Reading books has been a lifelong habit for her. Through her only other connection with the literary world is when author friends and family ask her to review their contracts with agents and publishers. Having lived in several major cities in India, she now calls Goa home, where she lives with her husband and her Konayu child Bantu. Coming to the book, Ladies Tailor is a book about Gurdev and his cohort, a group of refugees who travel east from Pakistan after partition. It is a story of falling apart and coming together. It is also a story of that which was torn asunder and will never be one again. A marriage, a country, a friendship. Over to both of you. Looking forward to the conversation here.
Yeah, I've known you for 15 years and this is new for us. Chatting about a book in front of an audience, and not just any book but your first full-length fiction. So thank you, congratulations firstly on that, and happy that you asked me to do this with you. So as I said, I've known Priya for 15 years. So Priya, I know the topic of, the topic is writing a good story, but I would like to delve into the book and your own journey, and apart from asking you questions about the writing processes as well. So Priya, you mentioned that in your acknowledgements in the book that you got your reading habit from you were influenced by your teachers, your mother, and I know that your sister, I think, has done English literature. So was this something, did you always want to have a connection with literature or become a writer, or was this something that happened along the way?
It's a good question. I was always a reader, and really like a mad, crazy reader with the torch under the eye and all that. But I think that how the older child has to lead the way, and I told my father that I want to study English and I want to be, I don't know what I want to do with it, but that's what I want to study in college. And he said, what are you going to eat? So I just kind of, I was like, okay, point, and I do like, I don't like to deprive myself of nice things and so on. And even at that age, I was like, okay, fine, I'll figure it out somehow, I'll keep reading. My sister, on the other hand, kind of stuck with her. She also likes to, I think we were very influenced by our mother. And she also was an avid reader, and she studied English literature and math in college. And then she got an MFA in creative writing, a full-time MFA, and she's never written anything. So she teaches, she's a teacher. So I was like, okay, I have come around and done what I needed to do and come back to what I really thought I wanted to do when I was younger, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to write.
So was there a moment when you decided, okay, I'm done with this corporate journey, or was there a story that you wanted to tell? What made you make that switch at that particular moment of time?
So yeah, I mean there is a story. There's always a story. I think if there isn't, then I think there is something wrong with something. My parents divorced when I was separated when I was 8. My mother was bipolar, and when we finished school, and we were both sent off to boarding school, so that we didn't have to deal with all the. And she had a lot of issues and a lot of episodes as they call them. And so we were sent off to boarding school. I was in boarding school for 9 years, and right after school we left for the US. We abandoned her. We just kind of got up and left. My father, my sister, and I. And 18 years ago, we came back because my mother had got married again and lost her husband the second time, and stopped taking her medication and had spiraled into the situation where there was nobody to take care of her. So we moved back to India to figure out whether we could, and I still, after all those years, couldn't really engage with her. I took care of her and I did everything that I needed to do to take care of her, but I could not have a conversation with her or connect with her or do anything. So I think 8 years ago we kind of came to this point where I didn't have to work as much, and I thought that maybe writing her story would help me deal with this whole thing, try to understand her mental condition, would help me deal with and can reconnect with her. So that was the reason I thought that I would start writing again. And I didn't want to just do a half-assed thing. I wanted to learn and everything that I hadn't done when I was younger. So I went back to school, I got an MFA, and I started writing. And the first thing I wrote was a collection of short stories which are based on my mother's life, which are unpublished.
And how did this book, which is the full-length fiction, what was the drive behind writing this?
So the drive behind writing this was not as emotional, but it was to understand. I think because my parents had separated, my grandparents were a very important part of my life, and I wanted to really and my grandmother used to tell us a lot of stories, and her stories always stopped though. They came from Pakistan. They were part of the refugees who came from Pakistan. But her stories never really talked about that move. Her stories would be about when she was younger and the village they lived in, and I was very, very fond of her and very, very close to her. And every night there would be a story that she had to tell me. But this, and then there were her trunks. So the house that they built in Ludhiana was built in such a way that there was not a single cupboard. There were no closets in the house. There was only a storeroom which was filled with trunks that they had brought with them, and she stored all her clothes in those trunks. She said, "You never know when we have to get up and move again, and I have to leave so much." And she never said this, but I'm conjecturing that that's the reason, because I was like, why don't you have any? We had all these closets and everything when we built our house, when my father built our house, and I used to ask her, I said, why are your clothes in a trunk? They then, when we were in boarding school in Shimla, first in Shimla and then I went to Sana, they bought an apartment in Shimla just so they could be close by and not primary caregivers but around. And she did the same thing there. They took their trunks and they had these trunks, and those trunks are, they have that smell and that feel, but that's, what it was. So I was like, let me try to understand their lives a little bit better. And I have named 2 of my characters in the book after my grandparents. And so this is kind of an aside, but my father was reading the book and it took him a long, he was like, I don't know if I want to read about it, because nobody wants to talk about partition. Now people are reading my book, that generation is reading my book and enjoying it, but at the time, when I was writing it, when I asked my father questions, he was like, didn't care. I don't know. Don't ask me. We came in trucks. This is the extent of what he told me. So that's kind of the basis of, let me try to understand partition, let me try to understand what they went through, let me, dig into that a little bit.
And why did you choose to go with fiction? Because I understand that even the collection of connected short stories, which is unpublished, is fictional,
Yeah.
semi-biographical, if I may say, and this is fiction as well. So how did you choose? Because these are things that are actually, you could have gone down the academic route and written about it in some other way. Why fiction?
Because I like fiction, because I only read fiction and I just cannot read non-fiction. And I think it's just, it's a personal preference. I find non-fiction very deathly boring unless it's, fiction. All the way. I mean, if I had to write, I think this is a discussion that I've had before about whether this is historical fiction or not. And I have this, what I say is that it is dramatic fiction set in a historical setting. It is not historical fiction. Do not ask me to write historical fiction, because then it's like I have to adhere to a lot of dates and events, and I paint a picture, and I think you can identify with this both. I paint the picture and then everything else sits in front of it, and that picture just stays there. I don't then try to make what's in the picture move. So I don't use real people, except I've mentioned Gandhi and I've mentioned the main players very, very briefly, but I'm not trying to put words into their mouths. So that is how it's going to be for me. I can't help non-fiction.
So what is favorite author, favorite book in fiction?
Oh no, that's a really bad question. I'm reading Jerry Pinto's new The Education of Beauty right now. So whatever I'm reading most recently is my favorite. But I really enjoy them in the big room as well. So right now Jerry is my favorite author. I can't think beyond. But no, I really like Amitabh Ghosh's writing. Alice Munro. There's a lot of influences in the Western world, women writers but I could not say that any is my favorite, because it's really the one that grabs me, for a 4 or 5 week period.
So coming to this book, I think I've read one of your interviews or watched one of your chats where you said you didn't really want to interview people who've been through partition because you were a little concerned about the bias that they may bring to the narrative. Am I right when I say that?
Yeah.
So what was then your source of information? How did you, did you feel that you get that authenticity in your narrative if you didn't speak to people? And what else was your source to get that right tone of voice?
So I did not. I think there were 2 reasons why I didn't want to meet and talk to people. One was like with my father and my my grandparents are long gone, but with my father and some of his peers, they just didn't. They kind of were dismissive of the time and the. So I said, okay, if that's the case. But fortunately for me, Partition Archives, this initiative kicked off at the 70th anniversary of independence, so 5 years ago, and there was a lot of general activity around partition at that time. So I got a lot of information from listening to. They were recording people. They were recording people before they died, because people who really remember things are aging. And so there's a lady in the US who started this initiative, And it's called Partition Archives, and I was kind of really, keeping track of some of that, listening to some of them, but not too many, because I didn't want to then also be too influenced by what they were saying. But I read a number of things. There was an event, there was a 2-day-long event in Oxford 5 years ago on partition, which was very interesting. It wasn't to talk about the independence of India, it was to talk about partition. And they had this this lady, she did her PhD thesis on the lives of people in Delhi post-partition. How they settled in and what happened to the lives. She'd done so I did things like that. I wanted to understand the time and the place rather than individual experiences, and I wanted to create those individual experiences understanding the time and the place and what was going on.
And your book has so many aspects that you touch upon in this fiction. You talk about, of course, the journey of the refugees, you talk about the refugee camps, you even talk about how property was allotted to the refugees, you talk about tailoring, you talk about embroidery, you talk about fabric. I mean, the list is about illness that one of your female protagonists is going through in great detail, medical terms, etc. So, one, did you do the research? Because I presume that there must have been considerable research. Clearly, you know about tailoring, or embroidery.
No.
So, did you do this research after you had the storyline, or was this research the starting point for the book? Because that's quite a few topics that you had to really delve deep in.
Yeah. No, so on the embroidery bit, I wanted, so that came after I decided that there was going to be an adventure. So I am a big thriller fan, fan of fiction that is the thriller genre, and I can't write it, so I kind of tried to have little bits and pieces of it in the story. And in order for it to be exciting, I needed my characters to go back to Pakistan, because it was, the borders were closing and there were little gaps in the borders. It was like in the early 1950s, and I needed them to, I don't know, this was just sort of something that came into my head. And for what they were going back is what I needed to figure out. And I thought about this, I was like, there's some expertise, some people, something that they need to go fetch from Pakistan, and without that they can't move any further. And so I actually thought, it could be a restaurant, it could be a recipe, it could be like a mithai wala who makes the best, besan ki barfi, or I don't know. But then I was like, embroidery might be an interesting one, because there is a concentration. So there's this young woman in Pune who has her shop. Her name is Shona, another Shona. Her shop is in this like very dense bazaar above a shoe store, and she makes the most amazing clothes. And she has actually been to Pakistan. She has buas and aunts who live in Pakistan. And there was a time, it's become very difficult to bring things over now, but there was a time when she would bring, I don't know, they call it lawn, I think they call it that cotton, that fabric, yeah, right? She used to bring lawn from Pakistan, and she had this whole line of, the pajamas were made Pakistani style and so on. So I went and sat with her for some time, and I looked at her piles, and I'm like, show me that, and what is that, and how is that? And so then I was like, oh, okay, I can do embroidery, and that's kind of how I got to embroidery. And then I did a lot more research and a lot more delving into the concentrations, and it is a very Muslim kind of concentration of people who are doing it, and it's boys. A lot of boys who are doing it, who at least were. Young boys and not necessarily women who were doing it. So that all kind of then came from things.
And how did you write about, have you ever been to Lahore?
No, I really want to go.
No, because one of the, a a lot of your book, especially the later part, plays out in the gullies of the bazaars, right? So how did you capture that? Or did you speak to people about that, or was it just through other writings? Or
No, I made it up.
so did you ever worry that factual or historical inaccuracies would kind of take away from the fact that this is a fiction? You know, people sometimes then say, oh, this is not right.
People get hung up, but I kind of, I looked at pictures, as many as I could, but the photographs that are available are current day. And I grew up in Ludhiana, and it's not that different. And I grew up in Ludhiana, and I went to the Chada Bazaar with my grandmother, occasionally. And we used to go through those gullies. And when you wanted kulfi with faluda, you had to go to this gully. And when you wanted, that's how it was. And I would probably never be able to find those gullies, but my grandmother would just be like, "Etho, nahi, etho." And then you're just walking through, these gullies. And I kind of wrote on the basis of that, and that was my childhood experiences. It was not, I have not been there as an adult. I don't think I will ever go to Chada Bazaar again, because I will not be able to enter. I won't know
Where to start?
Where to start, yeah. And in Chada Bazaar used to be pedestrian. You couldn't take your car, and you had to park your car near the police station, and then you had to walk through the bazaar, that was my basis of. I've also done some shopping in Patiala. So,
So those were your reference points.
Yeah.
So coming to your male protagonist in this story, he's not a very likable character, at least from my point of view. Very macho, not inclusive in decision making, especially when it comes to women. What made you lean towards a character? I mean, was that intentional, or?
He's modeled after my husband.
That I know is not true, because I know your husband longer than I know you. And that's going to be my next question. Have you fashioned this character on anyone? And it can't be Raj, so.
He said, it was so funny, because he actually said that his business partner, who happens to be a Sikh, he's like, your character is like with you. I said, I never thought, I did not think of that, but apparently, yes, it's probably true. Don't tell him that.
You're on video.
You're on.
No, but he's a fantastic person, but
Pegging that very quickly.
So, I actually, interestingly, I think the shape and size of Gurdev is probably would be, but not much else. I needed a character who was going to be like shut down, put down, squashed, smushed by women. I needed a character who was going to be shaped and cut down to size by these two women, the two women characters. So he had to be rough, he had to be, obnoxious, he had to be someone who needed to change. He couldn't be perfect to begin with, because then the women wouldn't have much of a role. And I needed the women to be like as strong, because I need strong women characters. If I don't write strong women characters, my daughter is going to be very upset with me. So, and she started reading the book, and she's like, "Mommy, what is this?" I said, read. It's okay. No, but he's obnoxious. I'm like, yeah, read. Just carry on. So I have to write strong women characters. I'm not allowed anything different. But there has to be something that there's room for improvement. So that's why I kind of made him as boorish and as inconsiderate as I could.
And is it hard to write about, write a character who belongs to the opposite sex? Was that something that you found difficult? Writing about a man?
I used to ask. I used to ask my
Metrosexual man.
man. No, because there are things that I didn't really understand. Like for instance, I asked him. It's being recorded, but what the hell? But I asked him. I said, if you're sitting next to a very attractive woman in a rickshaw, right next to an attractive woman who you're probably like kind of attracted to, but you don't know yet, and your whole one side of your body is touching, one side of this, are you going to be turned on? Like, are you going to be physically aroused? So I had to ask him, I said, would that happen? So,
we won't ask you what he says. So.
no, but I had to ask him things like that because I didn't really, it's very different for women as you know, so.
And you mentioned that you've written some very strong female characters, which is true. Was that easier to write?
See that
those
yeah,
easier to put down and take on
that was it was kind of a balancing act because it was a time when women were not supposed to be that assertive, and some people have actually told me that one wouldn't leave. Oh, sorry, I wouldn't want to. I don't want to give things away.
No spoilers, please. Not from the
A woman wouldn't do what this woman did, and even the other woman, she wouldn't do what she did. I mean, it's not realistic. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, but at the same time, I think my thought was that there's always women who will buck the trend, and there will always be women in any time period that you want to look at. There will always be women who will be like, I'm going to do it differently. And so these two women are those women. One of those, couple of those women who will. So I tried to keep them a little toned down. Like she waits a long time before she kind of says
what she says.
Yeah, and she takes a lot of shit before she reacts, which is probably her conditioning and her training because of the period that they live.
So one of the characters which is Simrat, is barely there for what, like she makes a brief appearance in my opinion in the thing. But what I've read online and from your readers, and I've watched you or heard you or read somewhere, that's the character that seems to evoke a lot of curiosity, interest, connection, especially among female readers. What do you think is it about that character that makes them curious about her? Or was that the character that you were closest to is then emotionally? Or was it somebody else?
Ooh, that's mine. Wicked. No, you know why I smiled? It's because when we launched the book in Delhi, what's the lady's name? Kaveri Bamsa interviewed me in a very similar fashion because Niru and I have not discussed any of these questions, not at all. She didn't send me anything, and we're just going absolutely like surprised. Yeah. And so she didn't do that either. She didn't send me any of the questions, and she said, like just out of the blue, she's like, "Is Simrat your mother?" And I'm like, what? So that's why I smiled, because I was like, what? And I don't know how she and I had a chat, okay, prior to the thing, and Niru had known me for 15 years, so we didn't need even that chat, but I don't know Kaveri, and so we had a conversation, just tell me about yourself, where did you grow up, what did you do, blah blah blah. So I had just a chat with her, and on the basis of that, she's like, so is Simrat your mother? I was like, okay. So, possibly, and that is why I think that there is, I kind of have given her this inner strength, yet, this ability to walk off. And so she was very important. She was the first sort of, if there's a big hammer that you're chip or whatever chisel that you're chipping away at Gurdev's, bullshit. She's the one who kind of did the first one. Yeah.
And is that the reason you think that she kind of connects, the audience connects with her audience? Because I know that many people were very curious about her.
I know many people who are really upset that
She made a short appearance.
that I didn't close out her story to their satisfaction. But I think that you were one of them.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so I don't know honestly why. Maybe it was the appearance was too short, and maybe people didn't get to know her well enough and needed to know her more. And so a lot of people have asked me if I'm going to write a sequel, because it's like, oh God, this smacks of a sequel, you've set it up for a sequel. I'm like, I haven't set it up for a sequel. I had not set it up for a sequel actually. I'm writing a prequel. And in the prequel I have I may have, I'm not sure yet, but I may have a little flashback that addresses her situation. I may even send his boys to Saddam. Yeah, so.
So, do you believe that there's something called writer's block?
I think there is something called, writers writing like gibberish just to write. I attended, because I'm a fan, Jerry Pinto's book launch in Pune. And he says that I have this thing that I will write 1,000 words every day, period. And I don't have any such compulsion, but I do like to write every day. But I don't get writer's block, I write rubbish. And he said, I can tell when I was not in the mood for writing, but I wrote anyway and it was just rubbish. And so you go back and say, what? And so that happens. Because if you force yourself to write, you will write, but it will be garbage. But then you have to be able to kind of say, okay, it's garbage.
And when it comes to this book, were there any conflicts, points of conflict either with the character arc or the story itself? Did you struggle at some point on how you were going to resolve some conflicts that may have arisen in your mind about how, the arc of the character?
Okay, so there is, I went and studied creative writing. So I know these things. So it's not, I know that there have to be layers to a story, that, that a very linear story gets boring, and there have to be, some things that kind of are revealed, slowly. So I did struggle with that. That's not easy to do. So I didn't particularly struggle with, an arc, but I did struggle with a little bit with how to keep it a little more, like how to hold things back and then reveal them slowly. Which, if you read the book, you'll see that there is a very simple linear story, and then there's a little undercurrenty thing that is happening, which comes out, which I worked at revealing over a period of time in bits and pieces, and then it comes to a really interesting conclusion that was really, really hard to execute.
And coming to the conclusion, did you ever think of going a different way from the way it played out? Did you ever consider the alternative scenario? If things didn't go as planned?
I did. I thought about, actually no. I went through many scenarios, but none of them were an unhappy ending. And this was actually, this is the conversation that I had with my father when he was reading it. I was like, have you finished it? Have you finished it? He said, no, I have this much left and I don't want to read anymore because now you have my parents because I use their names. And he's like, I don't know what's going to happen to them and I don't want to know. So I said, okay, no, obviously he was reading the book after I'd written it, but I had decided that, it is going to have a happy ending. It is going to be uplifting and it is going to have a happy ending. So it was going to be a positive one, but I don't think I had thought about, I knew that I just had to think about how to make it like there has to be resolution and reversal and resolution and reversal and you think it's over and you think, it's done and then there is a, so I needed that sort of a thing that happened.
So, what's the best compliment you've received so far about the book? And not from family and friends.
No, my husband was very complimentary and I have to recognize him for that. He's been very supportive and has said that it's a really good book at every stage, whether he believes it or not, because he read it so long ago and I don't think he remembers any of it.
What about any harsh criticism that kind of like, ouch, I should have taken care of that?
So the one criticism that, okay, so there are apparently a couple of anachronisms. One, I talk about plastic bags, the chutney was a plastic bag, because see, this is what we used to do when my grandfather brought samosas home and there was a chutney in a little plastic bag tied up with string and you would cut the in the corner and then it scored out into a bowl. So they didn't have plastic yet. So that is an anachronism.
And somebody pointed that out.
And somebody pointed that out. Yeah. Yeah.
So was that the harshest criticism? That's pretty good then.
No, but the harsh, there have been people who have said that I were very, very upset with me not closing and tying in the bows. Very, very upset. Yeah. Yeah. So that, but I won't take that as criticism because that's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I needed to tie her. She's off and she's taking care of her sons because they got to Sanaa.
In your head. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's a book that might lend itself quite well to a screen adaptation. I don't know. Have you thought of who you want playing some of your characters? Because it is a thriller, like you said. You think there's resolution.
Rajat Kapoor, Tabu, and their wife.
A mischief.
But I'll tell you, my agent told me that she has been pitching it for film rights and people have been very interested. But unfortunately, money is very tight in everywhere, OTT, Bollywood, everywhere, TV, everywhere. Money is very tight. They are not looking. I was laughing. They're not looking for period dramas that require a lot of sets. They want the here and now. They want modern, so that they can just go into any, and shoot a film like in 5 days. And
so we shouldn't hold our breath about one.
Yeah. So there has to be more money coming in. If anybody has money, please put it into and they need more.
So I think moving on to other about your writing now, you've published columns as well. Then you have columns coming out. That collection of short stories that's not yet published. Your full-length fiction. Which one is the hardest to do, and which one gives you the most satisfaction?
I'm really enjoying writing this little column because I'm writing things that matter to me, writing about things that matter to me. It's not a major newspaper, it's the Daily Guardian of Delhi. It's a newish newspaper. But they're publishing what I write without any, and they're not asking me to write this or write that. And it's more of I think just to help me get the word out about my book. I'm enjoying that, but writing non-fiction is, I think, the most exciting and satisfying experience that I have had and I continue to have. I've written another book which I finished, which is being edited, and I'm working on a third one, which is the prequel to this. And it is like, I mean, I don't know what I was doing for 22 years working in telecom and whatnot. But it's really, it's very exciting.
And given your experience now of having published in full-length fiction, has anything changed about your writing process? Has there been a lot of learning, and have you changed something consciously about the way you write?
I think the most important thing that I have changed is I'm really very, very unafraid to throw things out. I used to be really scared of like, oh my god, the sentence is so beautiful, and I would cut it and I would paste it in another document. I would label the document saying cuts that I may want to come back to. And now I have realized that if you're cutting, you don't have to come back to it, even if it's a really beautiful paragraph or sentence or whatever, you can just chuck it. And something new will come back and it will be better.
And for anyone who doesn't have a financial, safety net or a social, kind of privilege that, some of us may have, would you recommend writing after all that you've gone through? Because I know that your journey to get published was not an easy one. Would you still recommend writing as a career?
No. I would not. I don't think it's. Unfortunately, I think you have to kind of write for yourself, and you have to write not as a. I don't think you can. Then this things really have to change very, very, very dramatically for people to want to write as a career. And I mean, they were sitting back there as a bookstore owner was like, what? But it's so bad. It is so difficult. It is so hard, to get published and to market your book and to get people to pay. $300 to buy your book. I want to say this because it's being recorded, but somebody actually asked me, a book club asked me if I could share a PDF of my book for their readers. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't understand why at the time, during the Diwali discounts and everything, my book was selling for 124 rupees on Kindle. I'm like, I think you can do that, and you can't. And if you're asking the author for a PDF, I think it's really shameful. So I hope that people start buying and reading more books. But otherwise, I don't know who's going to write.
Well, I hope you continue writing.
I'm going to continue writing because my husband is taking care of me.
So I think any extract or portion of the book that you read that you made up to your favorite.
I'm taking this from Jerry Pinto. I don't read.
Nice. And I think you already mentioned what you're writing, because that would have been my final question. What's the next search? What are you curious about? What do you want to understand better? Because that seems to drive your writing process.
So this is that does drive my writing. So my second book is about financial scams, with financial scams as a backdrop. My third one is about. There was a lot. So it's really delving into Sikh history, because the Sikhs in the history of the relatively modern history of India have fought against the British, then with the British, for the British, then again for the British for a period of time, and then against the British in the independence movement, and so on. So it's been this sort of, and the mutiny, I think, was the one, or the first war of independence as it's referred to, was the one that I think a lot of people questioned the Sikh regiment's decision to fight with the British against the mutineers. So my third book is really addressing this back and forth that happened with the seats, going back to the mid-1800s.
We look forward to reading those, Priya, and I think if there are any questions from the audience.